Hi, are we on the air? Welcome to Dead Air Live. I'm Laurel Greenberg. And don't turn that dial because I think you're going to want to watch tonight's show. It's called Who Will Take the Eighth? And we're going to be discussing the candidates and issues concerning the upcoming Democratic primary for the 8th congressional seat. Are you planning to vote in the primary next Tuesday, September 15th? And if so, do you know who you're going to vote for? There are 10 candidates vying for this position. Do you know who they all are? We're going to be discussing that tonight. This seat has been occupied by, in the past, Joe Kennedy, Tip O'Neill, and John F. Kennedy. So it's a pretty powerful position. And the district covers Somerville, Cambridge, Belmont, Watertown, Chelsea, and much of Boston. We're here tonight to help you make your decision and also to give a chance for some people from important organizations to share their opinions with us. We're also going to be taking your phone calls a little later on in the show. So let us hear from you. Let me introduce our guests now. We have Mark Moranti from the Bay State Gay and Lesbian Democrats, Cheryl Garrity from the National Organization for Women, Mary Lampert from Clean Water Action, Vote Environment, and Stephen Stefano from Citizens for Participation in Political Action. Almost got everybody. I'm going to start with Cheryl to describe your organization and the issues you feel pertain to this district and this race.
Well, the National Organization for Women is a grassroots organization committed to all of the issues affecting women, whether it's economic justice, abortion rights, lesbian and gay rights, violence against women. And what we feel is most crucial in the 8th Congressional District is that we elect somebody who is going to be a voice and a leader in Congress on these issues. Not somebody who, certainly not a Ray Flynn, who has a poor track record on our issues. And we know that there are plenty of good candidates in the field, and without any disrespect to any of them, we have endorsed Marjorie Clapprood, and we feel that she's what this district needs, and also what we need nationally as a leader on women's issues, who's going to be a passionate voice for those who've often been left behind by the Newt Gingriches in Congress today.
Okay. And Mark?
The Bay State Gay and Lesbian Democrats is a grassroots membership organization statewide, which, as its name suggests, is gay and lesbian Democrats in Massachusetts, and looks at interest at the federal level, interests of the gay and lesbian community specific to domestic partnership, to civil marriage rights, to some AIDS funding questions, to anti-discrimination laws, which do not exist at the federal level for gay and lesbian people. And the organization considered and chose not to make an endorsement in this race. None of the candidates reached the level that was required to make an endorsement.
Interesting. Get more on that later. And Mary Lampert.
Yes, I'm from Clean Water Action, Vote Environment. We have about 600,000 members nationwide, over 30,000 in Massachusetts. We are concerned with the environment, not certainly solely open space, but we focus more on pollution prevention, corporate responsibility, public health, safety as it relates, which it does, to the environment. We all want clean water, we all want safe food, we all want air that's clean enough to breathe, okay? And so to determine who we're going to endorse, or whether we will, we send a questionnaire out on all the issues that are pertinent not only to this district, to the state, to the nation as a whole, tabulate their responses, see who talks the talk, and we give them a grade. Then our second level is to look at what actions the candidate has taken, what is their track record. Do they walk the walk? Then we look at their political viability. Does the candidate A have a chance, so we'll put our canvassers and money behind the candidate, and is the personality politically astute, so they in fact can carry forth with their ideals and agenda. And in this case, it was a no-brainer. John O'Connor is Mr. Nader. He's up there. Jesse Jackson referred to him as one of the top environmental leaders in the nation. Ralph Nader endorsed him, so it wasn't difficult.
Okay.
We're behind him 100%.
Okay.
He talks, he walks, he's got a long, long history of advocacy.
Right, okay. And Stephen?
I work with CP PACs. We're a multi-issue citizens lobby as well. And we work on state and federal issues. The issues that concern us currently at the federal level are issues of health care. We favor the Canadian model, the single-payer model, which most of the candidates do. We're interested in education reform both at the state and federal level. We've been very interested in issues of economic justice, in particular looking at candidates that are going to work to benefit the 80% that have been left behind for the last 10 to 20 years. Also focus a great deal around the military budget, and would like to see significant cuts in the military budget and have those funds put into social programs. Probably unlike the rest of these groups, we also touch on every one of the issues that each of these groups touch on. We're multi-issue groups. We've endorsed no one for this race, and the way that we do our endorsement is we send a questionnaire out to the candidates, and then we bring all the answers together, mail it out to our members, and then one candidate needs to receive 60% of the returned ballots. And like the mass gay and lesbian Democrats, is that right? No one came up with 60%. And our membership, I think, is a fairly good representation of the progressive end of the Democratic Party. And so, just like we're seeing in the polls, it's split across.
It's a huge race. There's too many candidates.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So we're not pulling for any one candidate, and there's no one particular issue that is really near and dear to our hearts, but just that we want to have someone come from the district that we think is going to be a forceful advocate for a number of our issues. And it seems that there's quite a few people in this race that can do that.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because I think what the problem is going to be in the primary is that because there are so many, there are a lot of good candidates, and people are going to have the same problem that your organization had in choosing who would be best, and also how would one candidate get enough of the vote to win. And we'll get to that in terms of polls and who's the front runner and who's in the lead and things like that. Knowing what we know now about the organizations, and I'll point out at this point that you're watching public access television, and that is a representation of the public, and the Somerville Producers Group has our own agenda and set of opinions, and we are certainly admitting to participating in that tonight. So the guests we have chosen specifically because they have similar beliefs to us, and we are setting forth a certain agenda and trying to share that with the rest of the public tonight. Let's go through the candidates and see what you have to say, just so that we can get the field sort of, identify the field. We'll go in alphabetical order, and we'll start with George Bacharach. Let me start with you, Stephen. Any comments?
He's in the upper tier. The upper tier consisting, of currently Flynn, Capuano, Bacharach, Clapperud, and O'Connor, and it seems that Tracy and Gabrielli are just below.
Upper tier of the polls?
Yes.
Okay, not in your...
Right.
Okay.
Just in, so Bacharach, he was, I believe, 2 terms in the, actually, I believe it was 6 terms, 12 years in the Senate, Massachusetts Senate. He was one of the progressive leaders. He was known for taking on Billy Bolger on a number of issues, one of the real strong advocates on many, many issues. He ran for this seat 10 years ago, came in 2nd place to Joe Kennedy, and he and Mel King were probably the 2 progressive choices in the race, though Joe Kennedy did a great job. And then, of course, he ran for governor a couple years ago, and came in second in the Democratic primary. And I would say that the biggest knock against him is now that he's lost 2 races, people sort of look at him as like a has-been. But he's never bent on his issues. He's always been a strong advocate for progressive issues and really stuck to the issues when he ran for governor. It seems that he's sticking to him now as well. So.
Okay. Mary, comments about George?
Yes. I was very concerned with the Boston Globe article that appeared this summer. It described Bachrach lobbying for business groups that clearly did not have the proper environmental agenda. In fact, they were polluters out to poison the neighborhood. John O'Connor would never do that. Example number 1 that the Globe gave was Bachrach lobbying for a dry cleaner group. And what they were lobbying for was to keep this a very carcinogenic, poisonous chemical, PERC, off the toxic use reduction list, which is an important list because it informs the neighborhood of what poisons happen to be in their neighborhood, but more importantly, it works to reduce the use of these toxins. PERC is a known carcinogen. It is a known chemical to affect the nervous system, and it also has very bad reproductive disorders. And so if he was out lobbying for that, I say, whoa, you know, what's going to happen if he ever got to Congress? Another example was he was representing Ogden Martin in their fight to put the 3rd incinerator, God help us, in Haverhill in a 4-mile square area. And as importantly, he was arguing against the Board of Health of Haverhill to allow Ogden Martin to keep their emissions of toxins high. Would John O'Connor do that? No. So, I mean, those are very good examples that were in the Globe, and therefore his agenda or track record actions are those that we cannot support.
Right, okay.
So therefore, I recommend the guy who would not do that.
Okay, very good. Mark, how does Bachrach stand on gay issues?
George Bachrach has a stellar record on gay and lesbian issues, both on his issue positions and on his record. His record in the legislature was a record that not only consisted of correct votes when, for instance, at that time, the Gay and Lesbian Civil Rights Bill in Massachusetts, which ultimately was passed in 1989, was at the top of the agenda, but someone who really took a lead on those issues, who worked on them, and who gave political capital for them.
Okay, thank you. And from the National Organization for Women?
I think Bachrach certainly has a good track record on women's issues. We endorsed him when he ran for governor. Our decision currently in the 8th obviously is for Marjorie Clapper because we feel she's more the type of person we need. And I would also point out that while George is a great candidate and everything, it's about time we got some diversity in Congress.
Well, okay, and he is pro-choice, and a couple things, he is in favor of a universal health care plan, and one of the things on his website was he opposes the death penalty, so among other things. Also, you might note that when we're going to these snapshots of the candidates, that we're showing their website address in case you want to get more information, so you might want to jot that down when we cut away to the clip of them. All right, next on the list, I think, is Michael Capuano, mayor of Somerville. We'll go in reverse. What do you Michael Capuano?
Well, we don't know. We know him as the mayor of Somerville. I would say that he has very little support within now. People aren't happy with his positions. He claims to be pro-choice, I believe, in this race. He'd be better than Flynn, but certainly not someone we would want to see.
Why do you say he claims to be pro-choice? I mean, you don't have much evidence that he would actually stick to that, or it's a weak sort of position?
He hasn't advocated for reproductive rights for women. Certainly the mayor of a city doesn't always have those options, but with city hospitals, you know, what efforts has he made to make sure that poor women have had access to abortion and birth control services within the city hospitals. I don't think he's even looked at that. The other thing that we have to be concerned with is he doesn't have a track record on the edges where we've been losing ground in Congress. Late-term abortions, minors' access, public funding of abortions. The edges are really the first step to doing away with all of every woman's right to
The little
choose.
thing that the pro-life movement is trying to sort of...
Which they've admitted, right. These are their first steps. They want
Chiseling away
to chisel
at it,
away
right.
here as a first step to doing away with reproductive
Okay.
choice across the board.
Right. Mark?
To echo some of those sentiments, as a mayor, he's not had the opportunity, for instance, that a legislator has had, to take positions, public positions on sort of the hot-button issues with respect to gay and lesbian civil rights issues. On the other hand, his stated positions on those issues in answering our questionnaire and other gay and lesbian organizations' questionnaires were perfect. He supports some issues that are more difficult, for instance, civil marriage rights for gay and lesbian people. And he is, to my mind, an interesting candidate in that he sort of crosses that town-gown divide that has been a long history in this district, in Cambridge and elsewhere. Someone on the town side in many respects who really shares the views sort of traditionally associated with progressive, more gown residents of the district. And so I think he is someone who the community would be pleased to work with, not someone who has as extensive a record as some of the other candidates.
Okay. Mary?
Again, he responded to our questionnaire, which is a lot more than Flynn did, and his responses were good. However, the distinction again is he's been a mayor. He hasn't lived or breathed his entire career as an activist as John O'Connor has.
Right.
He hasn't written a ream of books on the environment. It just hasn't been his bag, you know?
Right, right. So it's hard for an environmental organization
exactly.
to endorse him. Now, a big thing I know is schools, education. He talks about bringing down the class size of Somerville schools. You know, his mother is in senior housing. That's important to him. Do you have comments regarding some of those issues, or in general?
I mean, I would say again, I mean, he answered our questionnaire tremendous. I mean, he's taken some very strong progressive stands. You know, what I think, I mean, I think he is, he will be very good at representing working people in the state. I think that's really what he's known for as the mayor of Somerville. I think he is very serious about the issue of education. Among progressives, in particular among progressives in Somerville, he has a very poor reputation. And I think that that's really where progressives in the district are conflicted, because though he's answered the questionnaires exactly right, people who have had experience with him in terms of his appointments within the city feel like that they've represented more of like the old boy network. So I would say that some of the positive and negatives on him, but it doesn't see our, I mean, Somerville's school systems were not in great shape, and he's really taken it as a priority. So I think that that's not been false advertising on his part. And school size makes a difference.
Yeah, right, right. And whether he could do that in the whole district would be a challenge and a question. I mean, I think that it's important to note that, you know, for progressives, like you say, there are so many other choices in the primary. The thing that we obviously want to address is that, as of late, the polls have showed that he is
right up at the top,
and in such a spread out race, you know, what does that mean, and who do you want to, where do you want to put your vote?
Right. I mean, I think one of the things when you look at, if he was from Michigan, that's where I went to school, I think that all of us would probably be pretty happy with him. But this is the 8th congressional district, and we want someone, and clearly everybody here, we want someone who is going to be a forceful advocate and leader on progressive issues. And
who would match the people that have been in the seat.
Of course, and also, you know, I think CP-PAC's members in the district want, I mean, when we look down at Washington, there's a handful of people that represent our views, you know, maybe 10 or 15 people. And so we want to add to that and not take away, or just have someone who's going to toe the line, but not be, there's a difference between someone who has the right votes and someone who is going to be a leader, someone who's going to be a real pain in Newt Gingrich's side, and it doesn't seem that he's going to fit that.
Okay. Okay, let's move along to Marjorie Clapprood, and well, you've endorsed her.
Endorsed her. Definitely, I think that Marjorie is the person who we'd like to see from the 8th, not only to bring a different perspective to the table because of her gender and her life experiences. Marjorie grew up in public housing. She knows what it's like to have a mother who was on welfare. She spoke passionately in the state legislature on that issue from her own life experience. I think it's time we have a different perspective at the table. She has the experience to be a forceful advocate. She's had experience in the legislature. She's been an advocate on the outside with the Jane Doe Safety Fund for domestic violence victims. She's worked with the Failure to Thrive Clinic at Boston Medical Center for poor children who don't have access to health care. So she's not only saying she's in support of universal health care, she's actually taken action to make sure that poor children get access to health care. And certainly as a radio talk show personality, she wasn't afraid to take on the hot issues and to make her opinions clear. Throughout her tenure as a radio personality, she brought up issues of the Promise Keepers when it wasn't popular, to be challenging them. She brought up the fact that they were a right-wing organization that does have political motives, and that was not what people wanted to hear. They wanted to hear it was a religious organization. It was just a bunch of men getting together. In reality, she exposed that, and she was one of the few people in the media in this state and even in this country who was willing to publicly take that issue on and advocate and bring to light very important issues that I think progressive voters should know about. And certainly her life experiences run deep, from growing up on welfare to being a woman who at 19 found herself pregnant and was worried about abortion services and reproductive rights, which I don't believe any of the other candidates in the race, except possibly one, could say. And so she knows what it's like. She's been a mother. I think that those are perspectives that are missing right now from the Massachusetts delegation. And certainly in Congress right now, we need a forceful, passionate voice to take on the Newt Gingriches and to stand up for what's right and what's fair for the people in the 8th Congressional District and in the country.
And how do we think she's standing in the polls now? I mean, what?
Oh, she's clearly a very likely candidate to win. She's one of the contenders. I think all of the polls, from the very early polls up until the most recent polls, have always had her in the top tier. She's definitely stayed within her budget and been able to stay in the top tier, so she hasn't had the millions of dollars to do TV ads and the like, and yet her poll numbers are right there neck and neck with Ray Flynn and Mayor Capuano.
Should be very interesting.
Yeah, I think certainly given the margin of error, she is one of the likely candidates to win this race.
It would always be good to have another woman in the Congress.
Well, it'd be nice to have one from Massachusetts, period.
Right. So, and I know she's been endorsed by a couple lesbian.
She has. Our organization, as I say, chose not to endorse, but I would say of the other gay and lesbian political organizations in Massachusetts who have endorsed in the race, and the 2 gay and lesbian newspapers in Massachusetts, she has received the most endorsements, namely one chose to endorse her outright, the other chose to endorse her jointly with Susan Tracy, and both newspapers have endorsed her in the past several weeks. She has very deep support in the gay and lesbian community. She has an excellent record. She has, in fact, an excellent record since she has been in the legislature of working on behalf of AIDS organizations and so forth. She would be a fine candidate.
And I found this out on her website. A woman named Ann Sanders, who was the former Ray Flynn's liaison to the gay community, has endorsed her. Interesting. Okay, Marjorie Clapprood. Stephen.
She's a great candidate, and she would be strong on all of our issues. I just don't see her going to Washington and not being strong. So I would say that her strengths have been touched on. I mean, I think that in all of those. Since I'm trying to give both sides on everybody, I mean, one in the knocks is that she's not from the district and she moved back in, and I think that that's some people's concerns. It didn't seem to be a concern for our members. She got votes just like everybody else. And she's an excellent candidate and has always been, when she was in the legislature, a leader on CP issues. She's great. She has quite tons of experience, and I have to agree that she does come with experience that the other candidates don't come, and I think that that's important.
Yeah. Anything to add, Mary?
Nothing really to add that hasn't been said. I mean, it's quite true. John O'Connor has not been pregnant.
That we know of, right?
That's true. But I would like to add that Clean Water Action and most of your progressive, I would say, environmental groups have grown out of and remain part of the civil rights justice movement. And John O'Connor got our support because he was a very early advocate that because you were poor, because you were a minority, because you were from an ethnic group, you should not have all the undesirable land uses, you should not have all the pollution, all the waste sites. He was for environmental justice way before it became popular. And being an advocate within one field, the environment, for justice, for equal treatment for all, it spreads to education, the treatment of women, to gays, lesbians, to every segment of the population where you have the haves, the have-nots, or those that don't have enough. You are an advocate for them, and he has been. So I would hate to just leave anybody with the impression that we're supporting him simply because of a narrow environmental issue. It is a much broader picture there.
Well, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, why we had everybody on is to know about the issues that are important to these groups and to the constituents. But I also think that obviously every single voter has to take into account a lot of different things.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, though we like to hear who you all are and have endorsed, I think to speak as broadly as you can on the other candidates as well would be helpful.
I'm just wondering if I could just quickly respond to the fact that Marjorie's outside of the district.
Sure.
Is that okay? Marjorie actually grew up in the district, and due to some gerrymandering when they redistricted, her old neighborhood where she grew up was actually cut out of the district, and certainly her family had campaigned for Tip O'Neill. And I think that if you look at some of the other candidates, some of them are from New York or Connecticut originally. I think that we support every person's right to move into a district and run. What's important to us is where they are on the issues, and are they going to be a strong advocate for the people.
I agree. I was just trying
yes,
to touch on both sides and just what people are looking at. And,
Okay. All right. Okay, moving right along. Next in line is Ray Flynn. For a while, I guess he was considered the front runner. I've read some articles about him lately that he's been running on name recognition alone and not really making it an issue campaign. And we talked about the fact that this seat is one that has been progressive and has been very strong. And do the people in this district want somebody like Ray Flynn? I'm not sure. Mark, any comments?
You know, Ray Flynn's record as mayor of the city of Boston was actually fairly good on gay and lesbian issues. He appointed the gay and lesbian liaison, which has continued to this day, instituted or signed, I suppose, the human rights ordinance in Boston. For whatever reason, during this campaign, he has been essentially invisible on gay and lesbian issues and in the gay and lesbian community. He has not done any interviews, has refused any interviews in the gay and lesbian press, and has chosen not to respond to any questionnaires from gay and lesbian organizations. In fact, when he was finally pressed in the most recent, I believe it was, public debate, and was asked specifically about whether he would support domestic partnership benefits for federal employees, he dodged the question. And so most gay and lesbian voters and certainly our organization is very concerned about Ray Flynn. And I think to a large extent the dynamic in this race up till now has been, is there a candidate who can beat Ray Flynn, who has more progressive ideas? Whether that dynamic is going to continue in the last week, with polls now showing that he has fallen back into the pack, is unclear to me, but it is something that we're very concerned about.
Cheryl?
Well, I think Ray Flynn, I don't think there's anybody who's advocating for him in the progressive community, but in terms of his track record, as mayor of Boston, he defunded the Pay Equity Commission, He, during the integration of the City of Boston public schools, was not supportive of affirmative action, and today still does not support affirmative action, despite the fact that this is the most diverse district in terms of ethnicity in the state. And he also is responsible for a lot of the restrictions in Massachusetts on abortion rights. The Flynn-Doyle amendments did away with state employees' rights to abortion coverage in their insurance packages. That was just uplifted in 1996. Minors' access, he curtailed. Public funding for poor women, he denied them access to it. So he certainly has a poor track record. And I guess I would just steal the Clapperud motto, which is, united we win, divided it's Flynn. And I think that the progressives need to come together, or we're going to end up with Ray Flynn representing the district.
Now, can we just go back to what you said about pay equity? What did you say? He
defunded the City of Boston's Pay Equity Commission.
Okay.
And he took a long time to establish that commission. He finally established it, and then he decided not to fund it in the city budget.
I wonder if he thinks that's a mistake, because I read on the website, quote, if elected, my first act in Congress will be to file legislation guaranteeing pay equity in the workplace for women.
He said file legislation. He didn't say he'd actually pass it, or work to ensure that there was pay equity. And we all laughed when we heard him announce that this was one of his items that he would do when in Congress, because his track record in the City of Boston does not reflect a commitment to pay equity among city workers. And certainly he couldn't even fund the commission. He took a long time setting up the commission and making the appointments. He finally makes the appointments, and he doesn't give them any money to do any work with, to look at the salaries and find out, is there a pay equity problem in the City of Boston? So yeah, we all laughed when we heard him say that.
If he gets elected, I think there'll be 5 of us watching, waiting to see. Mary, Ray Flynn.
Actually, I'm in agreement with the previous speakers. First off, he was the only candidate who failed to fill out or return our questionnaire. And that certainly fed the feeling that he's not running on issues, certainly feeds the feeling that he doesn't really care about what we care about, the environment. And then when you look to his track record as mayor, he certainly wasn't the big friend of the environment. You all might remember that he was very, very active in trying to get the incinerator built in South Bay. I mean, the community was going crazy, but Ray was pushing for that incinerator with all his might, and it took Dukakis to bury that idea. He also, I know this area is very concerned about recycling. It's a big issue in this district, and I'll remind everybody that Ray Flynn was, to put it kindly, not a proponent of recycling, and it required really hard work amongst activists to get the city council to finally put a vote in so you would get recycling. So the track record doesn't look good, and the fact he didn't fill out the questionnaire was not a good sign that anything's changed.
Not a good sign. Thanks. Steve?
We disagree with him on a number of issues as well. They've all been mentioned here. We've had a couple events that he came to. He appeared actually quite unprepared. The military budget, he was the only candidate who actually said that he'd like to keep the military where it's at right now, even though it's as big as the rest of the world combined, essentially. So again, yeah, he is running on name. He's representing, I think, along with Capuano to a certain extent, the conservative end of the Democratic Party in the 8th Congressional District. The one thing I will say...
How big is that out there? I mean, how...
It's pretty big. I mean, there's a very large working class, conservative end of the district. And I mean, one thing I will say about him, you know, on his behalf is I do believe he cares about working people. I think that he genuinely cares. It doesn't mean that I agree with him on his positions always around those issues, but you know, as mayor of Boston, I just got the sense when he was the mayor that he cared. I don't agree with him. CP Pax doesn't agree with him on a number of issues. He did run on name recognition. He's spent virtually no money on the campaign, which I don't hold against him at all. But it seems that when he doesn't show up or answer questions, it's not only because he doesn't want to, but it's also because they just don't have, they're just not running a good campaign. So, and that's what, I mean, it was his race to lose. And if they had run a really good campaign, I think that he would have been a very tough candidate to beat with this many people in the field. I think any one of the people in the top tier or even the second tier would beat him head to head, and pretty soundly.
Okay, well, if you're out there and you're, thinking about the issues that we're talking about tonight, and you're concerned and you're progressive, and you want to go to the polls next Tuesday, cast your vote. All right, let's move along because we have a lot more to go still. Yeah, we can kind of shorten our comments. I don't know. Christopher Gabrielli. Let's go from the top, Steve.
One of the two very rich people in the race. But has very little of it. I mean, CP PACs, I think, agrees with O'Connor much more. If you're going to look at the two wealthier people in the race, they're spending an inordinate amount of money. I believe the report that just came out was $3.4 million, of which I think $3 million of it is his own money. He's bought his way into the race. It's something that we find appalling, to be quite honest, because the fact is that without the money, he wouldn't be credible. And I actually put a lot of that on the media these days, because that is absolutely one of the criteria for a candidate. Do they have the money to run a race? He had the first ads on TV. I have to say that I thought that they were very good. We disagree with him around the issue of charter schools and around charter schools and some of his views on education. He'd be, okay on a number of progressive issues in terms of the way he's answered, but he would certainly be on the more conservative end.
Okay.
And just remember where he got the money, which is, venture capitalist. He represents a business person's point of view. I don't believe that he would represent the working people in this district very well at all.
Mary?
I really
not
can't
much?
add much more.
Yeah.
I feel just a little questioning because of representing the business point of view that he is not really up to speed on polluter pay, other socially responsible issues the business should play.
Okay.
But he did answer the questionnaire.
Okay.
Very quickly, his issue positions, again, are very good on gay and lesbian issues. his past experience, and he does have fairly extensive volunteer members of various board of directors and so forth, organizational experience, suggests that gay and lesbian issues are not really what he cares about.
Okay. Sure.
And I think, again, he didn't really provide us any information. Nobody's excited about his candidacy within now. We have some concerns that, I guess his primary issue is education, but we don't agree with him in terms of what he wants to do with charter schools. And
What is it that he wants to do with charter schools?
well, I think he wants to develop more charter schools. There's some indication that some of his venture capitalist investments and so forth have been involved with some of the for-profit charter schools that have been developed. Our concern is that the charter schools are giving certain children a great education. And while we don't think that giving children a great education is bad, we want it available to all the children within the public schools. Even though they have this open admission policies, the people who are going to get access to these charter schools are those who can speak English, those who are educated, those who know how to advocate and work the system. And so already you have a limited pool of the haves and the have-nots. We think this money needs to be plowed into the public schools. These innovative ideas need to be available to everybody. And certainly we know what's wrong with the public schools. Lack of funding, lack of adequate textbooks, lack of computers, large class sizes. It's not rocket scientist as to what we need to do to fix the public schools. However, certain people now want to make a profit and allow the cream of the crop in terms of certain children to get great educations, and that leaves everybody else behind.
Okay. Tom Keene, Boston City Councilor for 4 years.
We haven't heard from him.
Says he's,
yeah.
Does he say he's pro-choice?
I believe he's pro-choice, yes.
Okay.
I think he's campaigned on that a little bit. Again, nobody's been excited about his candidacy. He hasn't been approaching us. I don't believe he's made women's rights one of his cornerstones of his campaign. Certainly better than Flynn. We'd accept him, but we haven't heard a lot from his campaign.
Mark?
Here's a candidate where we probably differ. Keene has a stellar record on gay and lesbian issues and a lot of support in the gay and lesbian community. Was very active on the recent passage of the domestic partnership bill for the city of Boston. An excellent candidate with respect to gay and lesbian issues.
Okay. Mary?
One of our criteria I mentioned was political viability.
Yeah.
And therefore, although his responses were often good, he did respond, it didn't seem that he would be a viable candidate to put a lot of resources into when we had the guy we clearly wanted.
Yeah, okay.
He identifies himself as a Tsongas Democrat, and that's socially liberal and fiscally conservative. And at CP PACS, we think that that's a very significant problem. In fact, Weld could describe himself as the exact same thing, and did, and wrote it all the way to the State House. And so, we think the economic policies that he represents and the ideas that he are talking about are not good ideas, and would really be detrimental to the district and to the country. He's moving forward that concept that just hasn't been working, which is that that we need to benefit stockholders and come up with new new forms of capitalism to benefit everybody, and it hasn't worked. And I don't think that he would be a good advocate on that. On social issues, I'd have to say it seems that he's great.
Okay, there are some candidates that, we're going to wait till the end. That would be the Republican candidate that if whoever wins the Democratic primary will go against, and there's an independent. But let's cover all the Democratic primary candidates first. Next in line would be John O'Connor.
So
the actor head of the national
I'm talking about.
No, I haven't. I could, though.
head of the national former head of the National Toxics Campaign, right here in Boston. Right, he was founded as that. I mean, without going over the stuff you've mentioned already, obviously.
What haven't I? Yeah. Okay. Well, here's something I haven't mentioned already, which I think people who are watching this show should consider. Often you equate progressive with spending everybody's money, and there, often that's a misfortunate link in some people's mind. And so I'd just like to point out that a candidate like John O'Connor, who certainly is Mr. Progressive, what has he been fighting for, and what has he been funding? The campaign for fair electric rates. This is affecting everybody in this district. It was the electric deregulation bill, which he opposes, wants to have repealed, would give a $12 billion gift of consumers' money to a few large electric industries. That's like $3,000 for each household. That is a lot of money. Wouldn't the people in this district feel more comfortable, particularly those who are on small incomes, fixed incomes, keeping that $3,000 for themselves instead of giving it to Boston Edison and the rest of the shareholders? John has also been working, for example, to keep water rates down, recognizing is, why should the average household be paying such high water rates to clean up somebody else's dirty mess in Boston Harbor? And so I think this is an important issue to bring out when you have the Keens of the world trying to appeal to, hey, I'm going to save money. I'm not a big spending Democrat. Whose money are they saving? That's a real important question. And so that is one reason amongst many that we're very much in favor of John O'Connor, because he puts his personal money where his mouth is and funds these important issues, these social justice issues, for the community at large, because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, so we know he's a progressive environmental guy. How does he fare on the other issues?
Other than Ray Flynn, he is the worst of the candidates on gay and lesbian issues. He opposes civil marriage rights for gay and lesbian couples. And he seemed, in our conversations with him and our responses to the questionnaire that we provided, really not to have thought a lot about gay and lesbian issues or about gay and lesbian people before.
I'm sort of surprised at this.
And so we're very wary of John O'Connor.
Cheryl?
We've had the same concerns on not only the gay and lesbian issues, but on reproductive issues, that he more or less has admitted that he hasn't thought through the issues and would want to see what the voters in the district would want. We think that that's rather dangerous to elect somebody for Congress who doesn't already have some sort of viewpoint on something as critical at this point in Congress, which has had over 100 votes. On the issue of reproductive choice in this term, not to have a position on such a critical issue to women.
Steve?
I actually have heard also about his views on choice. I hadn't heard about his views on gay and lesbian issues.
How did it do with your questionnaire?
He answered everything correctly. I mean correctly. I don't know. I mean, he answered.
Yeah.
He was in favor of every question that we asked around gay and lesbian issues. I mean, I think that he is one of a handful of people in the race who will be an outspoken leader. I mean, I think that that's the important thing about him. He is very progressive on a number of issues. I think on economic issues, he will be tremendous. He is the only one who really comes from an activist background. That's what he's been his whole life. And that, I think, is not something that's unimportant.
Yeah,
I think it's very important. He would be one of the few people. I think that he would represent the district well. I think that I don't know what he would do on gay and lesbian issues or on choice issues. I think that he would be bound by being a representative of this district. It would be pretty tough for him to be fairly conservative on those issues and not face opposition pretty soon. But on one issue I wanted to bring up, because I did talk a little bit about money. I mean, I like the guy. I think he's very strong on the issues. He is again an example of someone who became a qualified candidate in the sense of having a chance of winning, viability, because of wealth as well. He's put in, I believe it's 1.8 or 1.5 million of his and his wife's money. That's not his fault that he has money, so, I mean, and by law he can use it. But I do think, again, it points to the real need for, and it's one of our major issues, for campaign finance reform. There's probably many people in this district who have solid credentials on some issue, whether it's the environment or whether it's on economic justice issues or whatever, that just the thought of running for office. In fact, any one of the four of us probably have similar backgrounds to him. And he has access to money, and that's why he's able to run. Given the fact that he can do that, I think he's an excellent candidate.
I'd just like to speak, if I could, to that issue.
We don't have that much time. We want to get
Just
to
real quick?
Very quickly, very quickly.
Okay, very quickly, I would say this, that John is a supporter of campaign finance reform 100%, and he has chosen to spend his money for the public good and not to take fancy trips and buy fancy cars, but to send kids to college, to pay for tutors for them,
I'm sure
etc.
yes. You were just making that point, right? Well, bringing us to the other side of that is the next candidate, Alex Rodriguez. And actually, I want to say that we wanted to take phone calls. I don't know if the phone number has been put up or if anybody's tried to call. We will try to answer a question or two if we have time. We don't have very much time left, so let's get through this. Alex Rodriguez, when I called to ask him for a bumper sticker for our poster, said that he couldn't afford to make bumper stickers. So that's what his campaign office told me. So on the other side of the coin, Alex Rodriguez.
Again, a solid progressive. He was actually on the board of CP PACs, I believe, in the early 80s. He's a Boston candidate. I don't think that he is viable. Should he get I mean, I don't think he's going to get elected. Is my view on this. Should he get elected, I think that he would be excellent on a number of our issues and be a forceful candidate. Once again, money does play a role.
Yeah, right.
Go along with the same thing, it's viability.
Yeah.
And he's certainly someone to watch. Vote yes on 2, vote no on 4.
Okay.
I think
Women's
that,
issues?
Yeah, Alex would be fine. He was former chair of the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. Certainly, he would bring some diversity to Congress, but I think the issue is that he's really been invisible in this race. It's a crowded field, and money has played a part in that.
Well, Alex, we're trying to give you a little, visibility.
He's taken all the right issue positions on gay and lesbian issues, and in fact has spoken about gay and lesbian issues to, for instance, largely Hispanic audiences, which is, in a sense, his voting base. And I wish the world were fairer and there were more time and he had more money to take his message.
Okay, and Susan Tracy.
Susan Tracy is the only openly gay candidate in this field, and she was one of the 2 candidates endorsed by the Mass Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus. She did solid work recently on the domestic partnership bill and passing that bill in the legislature. There are some in the community who have concerns about her relationship with Tom Finneran. She helped most people understand she helped to ensure Tom Finneran's election to the speakership, and he is a speaker who has not been strong on progressive issues, including gay and lesbian issues. She did not, in her years in the legislature, take a very active role, or really any role, on gay and lesbian issues. And so there are some in the community who are uncomfortable with supporting her. For instance, only because she happens to be.
Yeah, I was surprised that on her website she had a list of issues, and not one heading was gay and lesbian issues. So I thought that was surprising that other candidates had that and she didn't, and she's openly gay. But
I think there'll be an interesting story to write when the campaign is done about the interaction, in her case, of her personal life and her political campaign. She came out and announced that she was a lesbian only weeks before the campaign began. And it's, I think she has written the script for how not to deal with being a gay person, and how not to deal with the gay and lesbian community in voting.
Okay. We have a phone call. We also have one more candidate to discuss, Charles Yancey. Let's take the phone call. I only see one line blinking.
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air.
Thank you very much.
What's your question?
This is Rick, and I'm in Somerville. I missed the first part of your program. I tuned in about 20 minutes ago, and I'm very interested and very conflicted about this race. I missed the part on Mayor Capuano. I live in Somerville, and to my perception is he's been very successful as a mayor. Would he make a good team player as a congressperson? And also he seems to be kind of one-dimensional with the education issue, and I wonder if he has more depth in other areas. If you could answer that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Rick.
You're welcome.
So Rick missed the beginning of the show. We did talk about Michael Capuano. I'm just going to overview really quickly. Stephen from CP PACS was not thrilled with Capuano. Really, not too many of the progressive guests here on the show were. We did discuss that he is very into education. Maybe that is kind of his one-dimensional issue. Anybody have any one point that they, or 2 points that they?
Well, I would go back to the point that I made about the dynamics of the race. To the extent that this race is going to be about anyone but Ray Flynn, I think Capuano may end up being the choice of some progressives who don't want to see Ray Flynn elected and believe that Capuano can make the divides necessary, bring together the coalitions necessary to win the race. And so we'll see. I think there'll be several polls in the next several days. But to the extent that Flynn is still in the lead or near to it, I think that dynamic may produce a win for Capuano.
Yeah, it'll be very close. I think that he doesn't get the 100% support from anyone here tonight, but he is at the top of the heap, and it could be, I don't know what other more progressive candidate would knock him out of there or have a chance.
I just wanted to throw in one thing, that this district has a very important legacy of an activist with burning passion. And I think that element, I haven't seen that element in him.
Right.
With the burning advocacy, the passion, and I think at any time in history, in the Congress that we have now, we want to keep that, as you were referring to.
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people in this district have that and want to see that too, and I don't know what will happen if we don't have somebody who is like that. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll be challenged. I don't know. We do have one more candidate we want to get to. We didn't touch on all of Susan Tracy's aspects, so let's jump back to Charles Yancey and give him some of our attention. Comments about Charles Yancey?
I think he'd be a fine candidate. The question is viability.
Once again, viability.
Right.
It's money again.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, it's a sad but true thing. But if he had, $2 million, I'd say that he'd probably be pretty well up in the polls. He's strong.
He's a city councilor for 7 terms.
Has a strong record in Boston on a number of progressive issues. He probably claimed to be the most progressive member of the Boston City Council. He's great. I mean, he's an excellent candidate, an excellent politician. Again, the issue of diversity. I mean, not only do we
African
have
American would be good to.
absolutely, and we have all white guys right now. So I think that he would bring that to the plate as well.
Well, it makes it a very interesting field of the 10 candidates. I mean, really, you got.
Right, I'm just wondering if I could just comment a little bit on Susan Tracy as the other woman in the race. Certainly Susan has had a great track record on women's issues in the legislature. In terms of her support of Finneran, she did do that and pass the only in exchange for a promise to pass pro-choice legislation allowing state employees abortion coverage, which was the only pro-choice legislation to pass in the country in 1996. And even though Finneran's not pro-choice, he allowed that to come up on the floor as a promise to the women who were supporting him for that speakership. We're certainly disappointed with him as speaker. Every bill gets bottled up because of him. And I think that in terms of the gay and lesbian issue, I think that certainly it can be uncomfortable for a lesbian to prioritize that on the floor. Barney Frank, although he's now out, didn't run as an out gay candidate. The dynamics are shifting, I think, and we'll see more lesbians and gay men running as out candidates in the years to come, which is great because I think that there was so much discrimination and so much hatred and homophobia in this country that even 5-10 years ago you couldn't really run a viable candidate for your first term in Congress.
One thing I want to touch on Susan Tracy also is that I think that the deal that she made with Finneran is exactly why she would not be the right person to come from this district. And she's a politician, and she is not the activist, forceful leader that we'd be looking for. And as important as that vote was,
He's killed everything.
Believe me, I think most people would be very willing to take back that trade and maybe at least get a fair hearing on a few issues. She played a very significant role in helping him to become Speaker of the House. And my concern would be that, what role would she play in Washington? It may not be 2 years from now or 4 years from now, but if the Democrats were to take over, I don't want someone who's going to support I want someone who's not going to support the lesser of two evils. I want someone down there who's going to advocate for someone who's going to be strong on all of our issues. And I just feel that that's not her role. She's, worker.
We're running out of time.
Sorry?
So I'm sorry for the candidates who are at the end of the alphabet. We tried to get to everyone, and I think we pretty much managed. I hope that that we were able to help you make your decision. I would encourage most of all for everyone in the 8th District to go out to the polls and vote in the primary and then in the election against the Republican Phil Hyde and the Independent Anthony Shinella. We think that the Democrat probably has the shoe-in. But go to the polls, vote in the primary. I hope we've helped you tonight, and good night from Dead Air Live.